The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
How about now? Can everyone hear me on the call? If I could just get a show of hand, that looks like, yep, I think we've got the audio fixed now. If I could just get a show of hands, I apologize for the technical difficulties. All right, welcome everyone. I see some hands going up here. There we go. Beautiful. All right, welcome to National Government Services Hospice Lunch and Learn presentation of Hospice Transfers. Thank you for those of you giving me a show of hands. All right, and it looks like the closed captions are working now because it can actually hear me. That's great. My name is Erin Musamichi, and we are going to just jump right in here. But first, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. I have placed the handout in the handout section of your GoToWebinar toolbar. For those of you who weren't able to grab it from the events section of our website. And I don't know if any of you were able to join a little early. We do have some a new feature, some pre-webinar slides that we're running on a loop. I hope all of you were able to, or at least some of you were able to utilize or see those running on the screen before the webinar started, just giving you a little bit of information on what we have to offer, self-service, information on our summit that's upcoming in October, as well as how to catch us on LinkedIn and utilize our resources that are available to you. Also, a little bit about the GoToWebinar platform and how to provide feedback to us on the education that we provide here. It's the only way we know how to get better or how to better support you and give you the education that you need. And that's about it for that. I am going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation here. Again, we're going to talk about hospice transfers today, and a little disclaimer here that National Government Services produced the material at the time it was produced. It was current, but you can always go on out to the CMS website where current Medicare regulations can be found, and I've hyperlinked that for you on the slide. Anything you see throughout the content that is blue in blue font and underline is a hyperlink that you can access resources and information through that hyperlink. Any of our educational webinars, teleconferences, live events are not to be recorded in any method. And our objective today is to provide information regarding medical record documentation and regulations in reference to hospice patient transfers when a beneficiary transfers from one hospice agency to another. All right, again, my name is Erin Musamichi, and I am one of the home health and hospice provider outreach and education consultants here. And we're going to go through this short slide deck, talk about the hospice transfers, the transfer agreement, the agency expectations, a little bit about disputes, and some best practice tips. We'll review the references and resources, and we will have some time for Q&A. All right, so the purpose of a hospice transfer is to allow the beneficiary the opportunity to switch agencies without affecting their benefit period in an effort to provide continuity of care. So we really need to keep that focus on the beneficiary. And instead of having the beneficiary revoke the benefit or that hospice agency, discharge and prevent that the other hospice agency from having to complete a new admission, CMS does allow the beneficiary to simply transfer care from one agency to the other. And again, the main focus here should be the beneficiary and ensuring a smooth transition from one agency to the other. As you can see, there is a hyperlink here. There is a new Hospice Transfers article on the hospice documentation page of our education tab or drop down on our website. And the pathway to get there is if you're on the main page of our website, you go to education drop down, select Medicare topics, and that article again will be under the hospice documentation. Okay, so the CMS Internet Only Manual, Chapter 9, Section 20.2.1, Hospice Election, states a beneficiary may change hospice providers only once each benefit period. And a hospice transfer is not the same as a discharge or revocation. So make sure that you understand that. Make sure you're reviewing the regulations. The transfer is to allow the beneficiary or patient to transfer their care from one agency to the other without affecting their benefit period. So when the patient transfers their care, both hospice agencies can be paid for the same day, and both agencies will be paid at the appropriate level of care. It is not considered a transfer when a hospice agency is sold or has a change of ownership, also known as CHOW for short. It is also not considered a transfer when a patient revokes the benefit or discharges from a hospice agency and then gets readmitted to another hospice agency. Those are different things. So let's talk about the beneficiary transfer agreement. It should be the first item of business when a patient or a hospice transfer is initiated. And proper steps should be taken to transfer the patient without discharge from one agency to the other. So both the transferring and receiving hospice agencies should be keeping a copy of the signed transfer agreement on file. Again, this is the first item of business that should be happening, and it's very important. It's a very important item, and it should be kept on file with both agencies. The signed transfer agreement must include the name of the hospice in which the patient has been receiving care and the name of the hospice from which the patient plans to receive care, the date the change is to be effective, and lastly, the beneficiary or their representative must sign the document. Again, please note that this document should be kept on file with both the transferring and the receiving hospice agency. It's expected that one of the two hospice agencies will assist the patient or representative with completing the transfer agreement. As I mentioned previously, this is that first item of business, and a copy should be kept on file with both the agencies. And it's also expected that both agencies are in agreement on the date of transfer, as again, there cannot be any gaps in the dates of service. If there were, this would be considered a discharge. It's also the expectation of CMS that if the beneficiary wants to transfer to another hospice agency, that the agency obtaining the agreement will assist the beneficiary with completing the documentation. The hospice must be willing to reach out to the other agency and talk about a reasonable date of transfer to ensure that the transfer of care and billing go smoothly. We're going to talk more about that. So, in the event of a transfer dispute, which we definitely hope does not occur, but we know realistically they do, it is the expectation of both CMS and your Medicare administrative contractor, in this case NGS, that both agencies will work together to resolve the dispute in an effort to ensure a smooth transition of care for the patient and ensure appropriate billing practices. And remember, as we talked about earlier, or as I mentioned earlier, the focus should be on the patient. This is a tough time for the patient and their family or caregivers, and that should be where the focus is. Yes, you know, everyone involved in terms of the agencies, we know you have to have your paperwork in order and things like that, and that is also important, but the family and the patient and their family is also going through a very difficult time. And in the event of a transfer dispute, that document, that first item of business, the beneficiary transfer agreement, is going to be requested to verify that the event was initiated by the patient and that it was signed and it's valid. So please, in this situation, if there is a dispute, you need to reach out to your provider contact center for your jurisdiction. And I've hyperlinked the provider contact center page here on our website on the slide here. And be prepared to provide that detailed information, such as the other hospice agency's information, the transfer date, and have your transfer agreement available to reference during your call. The transferring agency will need to send the beneficiary election statement from when they elected the benefit and the physician certification of terminal illness that covers that current benefit period. These are best practice tips. This is best practice tips as in suggesting that you should do this as in it's the right thing to do. excuse me, for communication, for things to go smoothly. If the beneficiary is in the third or later benefit period, the face-to-face should be sent as well. And I would also recommend that you send the current plan of care. If you don't receive a beneficiary election statement or physician certification, or these documents are invalid as the receiving agency, then the best practice would be to produce or obtain these documents, meaning you should have the beneficiary sign a new notice of election or obtain a valid physician certification. You will not be making changes in the computer that would affect their benefit. You're merely obtaining this documentation to make sure that you have valid documentation from the point that you begin billing services for that patient. Now, the same is not true if the face-to-face is invalid or you do not receive a face-to-face if one is needed. And the guidance within the CMS IOM's Publication 100-02, Chapter 9, Section 20.2.1 states, if the patient is in a third or later benefit period and transfers hospices, a face-to-face encounter is not required if the receiving hospice can verify that the originating hospice had the encounter. However, in Chapter 11, Publication 100-04, Chapter 11, Section 30.3, it states, if the required face-to-face encounter is not timely, the hospice would be unable to recertify the patient as being terminally ill, and the patient would cease to be eligible for the Medicare hospice benefit. And in those instances, the hospice must discharge the patient from the Medicare hospice benefit because he or she is not considered terminally ill for Medicare purposes. Therefore, if the face-to-face requirement is not met, you would need to discuss with the other agency the issue, and that the patient will need to be discharged from the benefit. So please just keep that in mind when there is a transfer situation occurring. All right, and a little bit more best practice tips. I am just, for the record, am not a billing subject matter expert. However, from a billing standpoint, that transferring hospice would need to file their final billing before the receiving hospice can file the notice of change. So please just keep that in mind. If you are the transferring hospice and you know that, um, be mindful of that the receiving hospice um, can't file that notice of change until you, as the transferring hospice, have filed your final billing. So, you know, do the right thing and make this a smooth transition. Again, that's all part of it. Communication, preparation, all of that. And we're going to talk about that on the next slide. And please utilize this hyperlink. This is a new billing hospice transfers job aid out on our website under the pathway education, Medicare topics, hospice billing. And it is a helpful resource to you. All right, so it doesn't matter who obtained the signed patient transfer agreement. The two agencies will need to effectively communicate in order to ensure that smooth transition. First, a transfer date again needs to be communicated, and the last date and first date of billing will need to be discussed since there cannot be any gap in those billing days. The hospice who received the transfer agreement will need to reach out to the other hospice to provide a copy of that transfer agreement because, again, it's the right thing to do. Once those two agencies have agreed on the transfer date, the transferring hospice will need to provide paperwork to the receiving agency. And again, both agencies need to keep and have that copy of the transfer agreement on file and keep that on file. And communication is going to be key to a smooth transition. And again, preparation, documentation, collaboration, plus billing and billing equals everyone is happy. All right, so our references here are CMS IOMs, the publications 100-04 and -02, your Medicare claims processing manual, Chapter 11, and also Chapter 9, the Medicare Benefit Policy Manual. And of course, conditions of participation. And then ngsmedicare.com, I mentioned the 2 updated and new job aid and articles on hospice transfers. Medicare University is getting a brand new look. It is actually, as we speak, down right now for today as it's getting turned over to the new platform. So be on the lookout for that. We're all excited for that to come. Our home health and hospice podcast. I won't stay and give too much detail. Here's the links to our YouTube channel, Medicare Mobile, and LinkedIn, and then Medicare, obviously, and ngsmedicare.com and NGS Connects, your web portal for claim information and all things electronic submission for your medical records. And please, if you have not already signed up for email updates, please do that when you have time. And I will take questions. I did have the slide advertising our summit on the pre-webinar slides. I hope that you all had a chance to check that out. It is on our website. I also just hit send, and there's a survey link in our chat in the toolbar. Please, if you have not had a chance to, check out the summit information. It is on the homepage of our website on the banner. And I will start taking questions. We do have some time for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to type those in the question box. And I will do my best to provide an answer. I want to thank you all again for coming to the presentation and joining us today. All right, I don't see any questions yet. Make sure the question box is open. Yes, it is. Wonderful. Again, if you have a few minutes, please take a moment to complete this short survey just so we know how we're doing and if there's anything we can do better to provide education to you as our providers. We'd love to hear your feedback. And there is also feedback on our website as well. Feedback button, rather. All right, looks like we got our first question. We have a 81C processed and paid first claim submitted and a RTP for occurrence code 27. We always use at our admin date for the transfer date, and our first claim keeps returning to provider. Okay, so Deco Farah, I will pull up the, just give me 1 second here. Just gonna go to the, again, I apologize. I'm not the billing subject matter expert. That is Krista, but I'm pulling up the billing hospice transfers guide. And I'm trying to understand your question a little bit better here. So you're saying that you had a transfer situation and you have an 81C processed. Were you the transferring or receiving agency? Receiving. Okay. Okay. And it return to provider for occurrence code 27. So the transfer date has to match what is on the transfer agreement. And if it keeps being returned to provider, there's something going on with that. Have you called the provider contact center? That would be my recommendation. If you keep getting a return to provider and you've resubmitted and it got returned again. Mill, let's see, we had a case where a patient was transferring from another agency, but another part of the state. Okay, you can't transfer. There are different rules for out of area. That's not a transfer. If part of the transport from there to us in an area that neither agency has the ability to service, should it be a discharge from the old agency? Yes, that's correct, Mill. There are, I don't know off the top of my head which section it is, but that would be considered an out of service area. And it is in the chapter 9. I'm gonna look really quick. Let's see. Yeah, that would have to be a discharge. That would have to be determined between, I believe they resume effective discharge and an individual upon discharge from the hospice during a particular election period for reasons other than immediate transfer to another hospice is no longer covered under Medicare for hospice care, resumes Medicare coverage of benefits waived, and may at any time elect to receive hospice care if he or she is again eligible to receive the benefit. So, Mill, I'm going to direct you to hospice discharge because it explains the out of service. That's section 20.2 here. I'll put it in the chat. It explains the out of service discharge and also who resumes coverage if that were to happen. And this is the Medicare Benefit Policy Manual, Chapter 9, Section 20.2.3, Hospice Discharge. All right. It is 1:30. I will be ending the webinar, but if anyone does have any other follow-up questions regarding hospice transfers, I would encourage you to first definitely check out our new articles that both Krista and I have published to the website under the Education, Medicare Topics, Hospice Billing, and Hospice Documentation. Please take some time to look at those. Please, if you would, fill out the survey when you have a moment. And also, um, if you do have follow-up questions related to the education provided today, you can send those to ngshhpo@elevancehealth.com. Please be sure to include your PTAN, MPI, and hospice agency name and the education or webinar name that it is related to. Thank you so much for all that you do out there for our hospice patient community, and stay safe and take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day. This concludes our webinar. Bye-bye.